All right, everyone. Welcome back to Singapore Property Talk Law. We're tackling something today that's pretty important for anyone thinking about buying a condo here in Singapore. We're going deep on the Defects Liability Period, or DLP for short. It's all about making sure you get the quality you paid for and avoiding those renovation nightmares down the road. You know what I'm talking about.
Right.
I'm Damien, and I'm super excited to have Serene, our expert for this deep dive, joining me today.
Hey, everyone. I'm Serene. Happy to be here.
So Serene, anyone who's been following the property scene knows, there's been a lot of buzz lately about defects popping up in these new launch condos.
Yeah.
Can you break it down for us? What exactly is this defects liability period? What does it mean for condo buyers here in Singapore?
Okay. So the DLP, it's basically like a safety net for new homeowners.
Okay.
It's a specific time frame, usually 12 months,
Okay.
starting from the day you get those keys.
Right.
And during this period, the developer is legally obligated to fix any construction defects that you might find.
So it's kind of like a warranty period.
Yeah.
But specifically for any flaws in the actual construction.
That's a great way to think about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it covers both those obvious defects you see right away, what we call patent defects,
Right.
and then those sneaky ones that might emerge over time, the latent defects.
Why are those latent defects considered more tricky?
Well, because they're not immediately obvious, right? It can become harder to prove that they actually existed before the DLP expired.
Right.
So yeah, being super thorough during that initial inspection is super crucial.
You mentioned legally obligated earlier. What does that really mean in practice? I mean, can developers try to get out of fixing things? Are they obligated to fix it? What happens there?
Well, there's a really important legal case here in Singapore,
Okay.
the Sunny Yap case.
Okay.
The High Court ruled that even if a developer intended to fix a defect during the DLP, homeowners could still claim damages under common law if the rectification wasn't done properly or in a timely manner.
Interesting. So it's not just about the developer saying, oh, yeah, we'll get to that.
Right.
They actually have to do a good job of fixing it.
Right. Yeah, exactly. It's not a free pass.
Okay.
For them to just acknowledge a problem and then drag their feet.
That makes me feel a little bit better. So what kind of defects are we talking about here? Are we talking about minor cosmetic things? Or could we be talking about serious structural problems?
Well, it can range from minor imperfections, like
Yeah.
scratches on surfaces or uneven tiling, to more serious issues like water leakage, faulty plumbing,
Yeah.
or even electrical wiring issues.
Oh, wow.
You might even see things like warped tabletops or persistent foul smells, which can indicate deeper underlying
It
problems.
sounds like a pretty long list. So, Serene, for our listener out there who's just gotten the keys to their brand new condo,
Yeah.
what should they be doing? Where do they even begin to look for all these potential problems?
Because you get those keys,
Right.
it's not just about unpacking and celebrating.
Right.
It's about putting on your inspector hat
Okay.
and really meticulously going through every corner of your new home. The best way to do this is with a checklist.
A checklist. Okay, so we don't miss anything in all the excitement.
Exactly. And luckily, the Building and Construction Authority, or BCA, provides very comprehensive checklists for both new and resale condos
Okay.
on their website. These checklists are incredibly valuable for homeowners.
I'm guessing these checklists go beyond just looking for cracks in the wall.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what other things should our listeners be looking out for?
You're absolutely right. It's not just a visual check. You really need to test everything.
Okay.
Run all the taps, check for the water pressure and the drainage, flush those toilets, switch the lights and appliances on and off, open and close all those windows and doors.
Wow.
Make sure the aircon's working properly.
Right.
Check for any signs of water damage or mold.
Okay.
Even look for things like uneven flooring or gaps in the walls.
So we're going beyond just the visuals. We're really testing the functionality of the entire unit.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And while you're doing all this, it's super important to document everything. Take photos and videos of any defects you find, no matter how small they might seem.
Great advice. So we've got our checklist.
Right.
We've gone through every nook and cranny.
Yeah.
We've documented everything with photos and videos. What happens next?
Well, the next step is to formally report all those defects to the developer.
So we're not just jotting down notes on a napkin here.
Yeah,
We need to make it official.
exactly. You need to put together a detailed report,
Yeah.
listing all the defects you found,
Right.
include their locations, clear descriptions of the problems, and attach all those photos and videos as evidence.
And what's the best way to actually submit this report? Is it like a registered mail situation?
Yeah.
Or can we just, slide into the developer's DMs?
Well, a DM might get you a faster response.
Sure.
It's always best to stick to official channels.
Okay.
Check your contract for the specific method, but usually it's a formal letter or email to the developer's designated contact person.
So cover all our bases, make sure everything is documented properly.
Absolutely. And don't hesitate to follow up if you don't hear back within a reasonable time. It's your right as a homeowner to make sure these defects are addressed quickly.
Okay, so we've talked about the homeowner's responsibility to report any defects.
Right.
But what about our rights? What can we actually expect from the developer during this DLP period?
Well, the DLP is a two-way street.
Okay.
You have the right to have your property thoroughly inspected,
Right.
to request the fixing of any defects within a reasonable time frame. And if the developer just doesn't act, you even have the right to take legal action for breach of contract.
Okay, so we're not just at the mercy of the developers here.
Yeah.
There are legal protections to make sure they fulfill their obligation.
Exactly. But while you have rights, you also have responsibilities.
Right.
You need to report those defects promptly, provide access to your unit for those rectification works, and basically cooperate with the developer in good faith.
So no holding the developer hostage.
Yeah.
Because you suddenly decided you want a different shade of paint on the walls.
Precisely. Now, here's where things can get a little tricky.
Okay.
What happens if a defect pops up after the DLP has ended?
Oh.
Let's say you discover a leaky pipe, like a year and a day after you got your keys.
So are we out of luck? No more safety net at that point.
It's not quite that black and white.
Yeah.
While the contractor's liability doesn't automatically vanish after the DLP, especially for those hidden or latent defects,
Right.
things definitely become more complex.
So not a lost cause, but probably involves a lot more legal hoops to jump through.
Yeah, proving negligence,
Mm-hmm.
especially when you've got subcontractors involved, can be pretty challenging. There was a case here in Singapore, MCST Plan No. 3322 v. Merview, that really showed just how difficult these post-DLP claims can be.
So I guess this is where having all that detailed documentation we talked about earlier really comes in handy.
Oh, absolutely. Having a solid paper trail
Yeah.
with dated photos, videos, and all your correspondence becomes super important if you need to pursue any claims after the DLP ends.
So we've covered what happens if defects show up after the DLP. But before we move on, are there any other important rights or responsibilities that homeowners should be aware of during this period?
Yeah, one thing to keep in mind is that homeowners can't just withhold payments to the developer if they're not happy with the defect rectification process.
Okay.
There are specific procedures outlined in the contract, usually involving retention sums that need to be followed.
So no DIY justice by holding back payments. Got to follow the proper procedures.
Right? Now, let's shift gears a bit
Okay.
and talk about why we're seeing this increase in defect complaints in these new launch condos.
Yeah, what's going on there?
I mean, the pandemic definitely played a role, right?
Yeah, I was going to say, the pandemic didn't help, right?
And not at all. COVID-19 threw a wrench in the whole construction industry.
Yeah.
Disruptions to supply chains, labor shortages, project delays.
Yeah.
All these factors put so much pressure on developers to catch up.
Right.
And sometimes that meant quality took a hit.
Right. So
So-
it was like this perfect storm of pandemic-induced chaos,
Right.
and then the increased pressure to deliver these projects.
Exactly. And then you add on the issue of shrinking profit margins for developers.
Right.
With rising land and construction costs. Some developers might be tempted to cut corners by choosing the lowest bidders, and that could mean compromising on the quality of materials and workmanship.
That's a scary thought for anyone investing their hard-earned money in a new condo.
Yeah.
Are there any solutions in sight? I mean, anything on the horizon to address these quality control issues?
There are some promising developments, actually.
Okay.
We're seeing a growing trend towards using these innovative construction technologies, like PPCC, which stands for Prefabricated, Pre-Finished Volumetric Construction.
PQVC. That sounds very high-tech. Tell me more.
It's pretty cool. So PPVC involves assembling entire units or modules off-site in a controlled factory environment,
Right.
and then transporting them to the actual construction site for installation.
Okay.
This approach offers way better quality control
Okay.
because everything's built to these very precise specifications in a climate-controlled setting.
So we're basically talking about building with giant Lego blocks.
Kinda, yeah. PPVC can also help to reduce construction time and minimize on-site waste.
Okay.
So it's a more sustainable approach, too.
That's great. So it sounds like a win-win.
Yeah.
So Serene, we've covered a lot of ground today, from what the DLP is, to how to identify those potential defects, and even why we're seeing this rise in complaints. For our listener out there who might just be starting their condo buying journey, What's that one key takeaway you want them to remember?
I think the most important thing is knowledge is power.
Knowledge is power, yes.
Be informed, be proactive. Don't be afraid to ask questions. The DLP is a valuable safeguard, but it's not a substitute for thorough due diligence.
Right, so don't just rely on the DLP to catch everything. Arm yourself with those BCA checklists, inspect every nook and cranny of your potential new home, and now something doesn't feel right, don't be afraid to speak up.
Exactly. This is a major investment, and you have the right to make sure you're getting what you paid for.
Great advice, Serene. This has been incredibly insightful. Thank you so much for joining us today on Singapore Property Talk Law.
It was my pleasure, Damien. Always happy to share what I know.
And to our listener, we hope this deep dive into the defects liability period has given you the knowledge and confidence to navigate the world of Singapore property. Remember, being informed is the first step towards making a smart and satisfying purchase. Tune in next time for another deep dive into the exciting world of Singapore real estate. Until then, happy house hunting.